Oh, wow. All right. Well, my talk, my talk this morning is entitled "Every Ending is a New Beginning." Um, I've been just deeply contemplating that this morning, and all the things you all shared, your poetry and your scripture. It's all really, it all is really like it's contemplating that. Joseph Campbell, he was he studied mythology and religion. He wrote a lot about mythology, and he said this beautiful quote: "We must be willing to get rid of the life we've planned, so as to have the life that is waiting for us. The old skin has to be shed before the new one can come." I think about a snake shedding its skin. If we take a look at our life, kind of see our life and just do a little movie review of our life and all the chapters in our life, we would notice key moments where we were moved to make some pretty big changes. I was reflecting on my life. Could you all mute, please? Thank you. I was reflecting on my life. And I was remembering when I was 7 years old, we were living in Baltimore, Maryland, and we all of a sudden moved to South America for my dad's job. And it was such a big change for a little girl. It was absolutely a different world. I was thinking years later, we were living in the woods, the backwoods of Pennsylvania, and my mom and stepdad decided to move to Florida. So we moved into this house on the lake in Florida. It was another really huge change that affected me as a teenager. And I was remembering when I was in college, I was studying psychology. It was the closest thing I could find to spirituality. And though I love psychology, I realized my real love was music, and that I just couldn't, I just couldn't be a psychologist. That music is what I was going to have to do as my career because it was just what I loved. I remember my brother and I in our 20s, we went camping at Lake Tahoe for the first time. And when we got back to Florida, we decided, let's move to Tahoe. And we packed up everything in a U-Haul and we towed my car behind and we crossed the country and we stayed in a Motel 6 for a week and we found a log cabin, and that was it. That was the beginning of my life in California in the 80s. So in all of our lives, there have been many endings and new beginnings. And, whether it's relocations or maybe it's graduations or it's employment changes, it's relationship changes, it's divorces. Sometimes it's natural disasters like these fires lately. Sometimes it's the death of a loved one. And sometimes it's births. It's the births of loved ones. I have a friend who's moving to Austin to be with her niece's brand new baby. Everything in this world, everything on this earth has beginnings and endings. For instance, we definitely hit that moment in this last week where spring clearly ended and summer, hot summer, began. And if we look closely, we see that every end does contain a beginning. Sometimes we don't see what that beginning is yet. It's not clear yet, but every end contains a beginning. Spring ends, summer begins. Daylight ends every day. The day ends and the night begins. And endings come about for many different reasons. There's a phrase that I've been I've been really exploring this week. This phrase that we've all heard, divine discontent. What is divine discontent? Because we talk a lot about, you know, how not to live life in a discontented state. So what is this other thing, this divine discontent? I've been exploring it, and it's a phrase that we use when we know inside that it's time to stretch. You know, it's this feeling that won't leave us alone. It's like this restlessness that there's something more. There's something more for us to discover. There's something more that wants to emerge from within us. That we know we're meant to become. There's something more for us to discover. And we might sense that the present conditions in our outer life are not right for that emerging. They're not they're not really supporting that emerging. And so we feel this restlessness. We feel the quiet voice of spirit within, our own God intuition whispering, it's time. It's time to make a change. And, often at first we have no idea. We have no idea what that might look like. And, if we're afraid of change, that might be as far as we go. We get that restlessness, but then we stay put, right? If we've learned, though, we've learned to quiet and relax the mind, listen to that voice and trust it. Trust and faith are so key in really listening to divine content and then following where it leads and being willing to take a leap and being willing to overcome the fear of the unknown and overcome the attachment to what's comfortable. And as it's sometimes put, follow our heart or follow your bliss, as Carolyn posted on my Facebook the other day. Follow your bliss, follow your heart. Really listen to that and do that fearlessly. Or if there is fear, embrace it with courage. There's the novelist Anais Nin. She wrote, "I'm restless again. Things are calling me away. My hair is being pulled by the stars again." I love that. I love that visual. My hair is being pulled by the stars again. The stars are pulling my hair. Thomas Edison, he knew all about this feeling, this divine content. That's why we have light bulbs. He famously said, "Divine discontent is the first necessity of progress." Actually, he said, "Discontent is the first necessity of progress." But I want to talk just a little bit before I go further about divine discontent. I want to say that it is a different thing from just being in general a discontented person, right? Being habitually unhappy with what is and always fighting the present moment, that is something else entirely than what I'm talking about. If we are habitually not happy with what is, then we need to do some serious self-reflection. Eckhart Tolle offered some really great advice regarding everyday discontent. So useful. He said, if you find your here and now is intolerable and it makes you unhappy, you have three options. Remove yourself from the situation, change it, or accept it totally. I'm going to repeat that because I think that is some of the wisest words I've heard in so long. It's very much like the Serenity Prayer. He says, if you find your here and now intolerable and you're unhappy, you have three options. Remove yourself from the situation, change the situation, or accept it totally. Accept it totally. If we're not fully happy, say in a relationship, we can change it. And if we cannot change it, well, we can accept it totally. We can find peace with it. But if we can't change it and we cannot accept it as it is and find peace with it, well, our choice then is to remove ourselves from it. Now, sometimes it seems like life nudges us, we get these nudges. Sometimes they're big nudges, and our prayers are often answered in ways we don't expect. We might be asking for guidance. We're asking for, inner guidance, and life presents a circumstance that at first we might perceive as, wow, that's a drag, or that's really unfortunate. But then it turns out to be exactly what we needed to let go of where we were and move on to something greater that we're meant to do. I got a great example. When I was a kid, my favorite show was Walt Disney, The Wonderful World of Disney. Every Sunday night, it was something that as a family, we always got together on the couch and we watched. But did you know that Walt Disney, early in his life, he took a job as a newspaper editor at a newspaper, and he was soon fired for, quote, lacking imagination. He was fired for lacking imagination and for, quote, having no good ideas. It's hard to even imagine. But the loss of his job, it was a blessing in disguise because it freed him up to move towards what he was meant to do and to move towards what he really loved. And so he didn't give up. He headed to Hollywood and he had his heart set on producing a cartoon series. And he followed his heart and he followed his passion, even when others doubted his talent, even when his editor said, "You have no good ideas," right? But because he didn't let that discourage him, he followed his heart, and the world will never be the same. The world will never be the same. So I try to imagine how, Walt Disney must have felt about getting fired from that newspaper job a little later in his life. I bet he told that story a lot, that what seemed so unfortunate was such a blessing. So the point that I want to make is that we all have a divine destiny, and we will have promptings of divine discontent at times if we're too settled in our ways, if we're not growing as much as we could be growing. And I was recently listening to a sermon by Eric Butterworth, one of Unity's most beloved ministers, and he was good friends with Charles Fillmore. And he wrote this talk about divine discontent. I highly recommend it. But he said, "Consider the words of Jesus. I came not to bring peace, but a sword." In other words, I came to stir things up. In other words, I came to tell you, get moving and get changing and be involved and grow. I came not to make you contented with yourself and the world you live in, but to be divinely discontented. That's your sacred obligation, to never forget that you are a growing creature. You are made for greater things. Jesus came to change people, to make them realize their divine destiny, that there is more in us, and it doesn't matter your age. There is more in us to learn. There are more ways for us to grow, you know? And sometimes change is happening and we don't want it to, right? We don't want it to. Sometimes we're excited about change, but sometimes it's hard. It's just hard. And sometimes it's both. you know the Buddhists talk about the 10,000 joys and sorrows in our lives. Does anyone in this world, do any of you not have the 10,000 joys and sorrows? We all have the 10,000 joys and sorrows in life. Nobody gets out of here without 10,000 joys and sorrows. But our spiritual life and our spiritual practices, that's what makes the difference in us fighting change and going through life just with our heels dug in, or gracefully, more consciously moving through change, accepting change, trusting life, right? Change is going to happen, right? Whether we fight it or we flow with it. So the choice of how we respond, that is ours. We always have that free will. Rumi wrote, this is so perfect for today. Rumi, since Charlie didn't do the Rumi, I'll do the Rumi. "I will find new meaning in every joy and sorrow. In the silence, I will hear the voice of spirit. And freed from this world, I will see another world where the end is another beginning." And this past week, I've just felt some real sadness and sorrow, in this process. I had a sleepless night, and I just dove right into all these feelings. They really rose up this week because I've never been here before. I've never done 4 years as a minister, and then I'm leaving. And I know enough to be present, to be loving awareness with all that I feel, and to hold everything, to hold the sadness and the sorrow in loving awareness. And do like Rumi is suggesting, find new meaning in the sorrow, find deeper meaning, stay with it. Don't want to change it so quickly. Be with the grief, be with it. It ripens you, it makes you something else more beautiful, something richer. So I realized that, some of the sorrow, I mean, to be really honest, is that I wished I could have connected deeper with some of you. I wished I could have helped some more. and I will miss you, and I will miss this. And I also realize I need to be compassionate with the self-doubt that sometimes arises, and I've been with that. But I've also realized that the love and connection that we have shared, every moment of love, every moment of kindness, every moment we've connected, because we've connected in a holy way. You know, the relationship where the time we're together, we pray, we meditate, we sing, and we contemplate deeper truth. That's holy. That's kind of a deeper relationship. That's more than, casual or personal. So that is something, the moments we've shared that way, we can never lose that. That's something we carry with us. When Jesus said, I'm with you wherever you go, you are with me always. That's what happens when we connect in the heart and we connect in the spiritual realm. We connect in the most holy way. We have the truest meeting. So, to be conscious, we stay present with all the feelings that come up. Our brain is wired to focus on what there is to worry about. It's just the way our brain is wired. It's what kept us alive as animals and evolving humans. So our mind can sometimes get stuck focusing on what is ending without giving equal attention to the possibility of new beginnings. There's a story I recently read about a woman who would always get so sad when the sun set. The sun would set, and when it would finally drop below the horizon, she would weep. She would weep bitterly every night. She was completely caught up in only noticing the continual experience of loss. She would notice the roses that were already fading, the roses that were drooping, that were losing their petals. So one day she went to see a wise Dharma teacher, and she said to the teacher, everything dies. It's so incredibly sad. And the teacher pondered for a moment and then responded, it's not sad, it's just true. Sad is the story you tell yourself about it. And the woman had an epiphany, and she realized that she was only telling herself one part of the story, the sad part. And she wasn't seeing the other side of the story. She wasn't recognizing that the sun is also rising in the morning and offering a new beginning of a new day. She wasn't seeing that the dead roses and their petals falling were becoming compost for new growth, for next season's roses. And so, though I'm leaving and I feel some sadness around it, in that, it feels like a sunset. I also know there is a new sunrise calling me in my life, and there is a new sunrise for this spiritual community, Unity of Orville, that is to be discovered. I've been imagining that part of that sunrise is the empowerment of everyone stepping up more to all together be the body of Christ in a more visible form. In these past 15 months, we've basically just had this virtual church experience, and it cuts out a lot of opportunities to serve together as a community creatively. There's so much more you can do in person, coming back together. And so those opportunities are going to be abundantly available. Eric Butterworth, in his talk, he tells this story about Prometheus. I've been, reading about Prometheus this week too. And Prometheus was the Titan god of fire. He was the god of fire in Greek mythology. And Prometheus was said to have made humans out of clay. And he loved humans. He loved these beings that he made. But he longed to give them something to really empower them, to make them special. He wanted to give them a part of himself. So he stole fire from Mount Olympus, and he gave humans fire. And the fire, the fire was actually a symbol of creativity. He gave them creativity, he gave them life, he gave them love, he gave them wisdom. And so, you hear the word Promethean, and it carries the meaning of being creative and being vivifying and bold and original. So we have this Promethean voice within us. We have this Promethean gift, this capacity of creativity to be ever becoming anew. We have this inner spark, right? Every one of us does. And we have this inner spark that if as we fan the flames, we transcend again and again our human limitations that we come up against. We can always achieve these greater heights. You know, that voice is always calling. It's like the voice of the creator, the voice of the universe. It's saying, rise up, come up higher. There is greater life for you to realize. Don't think you're too old or you're too tired or you're too sick or, you know, life has passed you by. So when we reflect on our lives, we can ask ourselves, am I listening to that voice, that Promethean voice? Am I giving enough time to consider the divine discontent and give it room? Give it room to pull me out of the rut of maybe a life that's comfortable but not so interesting or inspiring. You know, Butterworth, he calls this inner urge to grow youthing. I love that, youthing. And when we follow this inner urge, it keeps us young. It keeps us truly alive, truly living while we're alive. Now, I just had a birthday, you all know, last month, and I'm determined to keep youthing. You know, I like that word, and I feel like I'm in the prime of my life. You know, I'm just deciding that's where I'm at. And Butterworth, you know, he talked about watch out for the mental cholesterol, right? The mental cholesterol, those thoughts that tell us that we're too old, right? Or we're too tired, or it's too difficult, or we're too poor, or there's too many obstacles. Reminds me of that quote from Charles Fillmore. I recently read this quote. He said this quote when he was 94, but I actually learned he sang this. He wrote this in a song. I fairly sizzle with zeal and enthusiasm, and I spring forward with a mighty faith to do the things that should be done by me. Sizzling at 94. I'm determined to sizzle at 94, God willing, God willing. So Fillmore, you know, he was excited about his spiritual journey of awakening. He was too excited to bother growing old, you know. His whole life was such a great example of listening to that divine discontent and, you know, continuing his growth and inspiring so many people to this day, to us in this moment right now, to get on with it, that life is for growth. When Jesus, you know, said, be perfect even as your Father in heaven is perfect, it sounds like he's saying, listen to the promptings of your inner being, of the God of your inner being speaking to you. Those promptings, excuse me, that move you towards greater genius and greater mastery and greater creativity and greater love and greater expression. There's so much possibility in each and every one of us. So, in closing, as my dear friend always likes to say, she always signs her emails, onward and upward, onward and upward. Let us ever listen to the voice of our God self, our intuition that whispers, there is more, there is more. Explore with zeal and enthusiasm. Move in an upward progression of greater expression of your true nature as love, as joy, as beauty, as a co creator, as a divine instrument of peace, bringing healing, bringing blessing, bringing love wherever you are. So be it. So be it. And so it is. Thank you.
Wonderful, Kathy. That was great. That
Thank
was
you.
just perfect.
Thank you so much.